So
Yay.
the first thing that we're gonna do is get this bread in the oven because it's gonna take us time to get it to bake.
450, right?
450 degrees, yep. And it's a good idea when it comes to temperature to start it again. So, just hit 450 bake again because sometimes it'll drop temperature and you don't even know it.
Okay.
So I'm going to add a little bit more flour to my dusting bowl here. And then we're going to go, hi, Vicki.
Hey, how are you?
Good, how are you? Let's see if I can get us all in there.
Doing great.
Can y'all see me okay?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Hi,
Okay.
Vicki and Kristen.
Oh, yeah, that's good. Okay, so
Hi,
I've got,
Kristen. I'm Vicky.
I got some paper, parchment paper. I dusted it with some flour. I took my loaf out of the refrigerator, so it's cold, but that makes it much more easy to score. All right, so I'm just gonna slip it over to my hand and put it on the sheet tray. You can flip it right to the sheet tray too, but I just like to do that.
What was room temperature? What did you say?
No, it's cold.
It's cold.
Yes.
The bread is cold.
Right.
It came right out of the refrigerator.
Yep, it sure did. All right, we're gonna cover it with a dusting of flour. And we're gonna score it. Any particular score you want to see? No? Okay.
Do the swirly one.
The swirling one.
I saw a picture one of the,
You want the circle?
Sure.
Okay. So we're gonna start in the center. You're gonna hold your blade at an angle. And you're gonna come around and you're just gonna follow the loaf. So I turn the loaf rather than turn them to a knife. I'm just gonna follow around. Turn the pan. Come around. And you can be as close or as wide open as you want to be. Just I try to keep it somewhat equidistant. Sometimes it doesn't always happen, but we do the best we can.
Hey, Chris,
It always comes out pretty. Yeah.
what does the scoring do? Is it just for decoration or is there a reason
No,
behind
there is
it?
actually a reason. So the reason that we score the bread is so that it doesn't bust open. Because as it expands, it's going to pick the weakest point to open up. So what you'll have is a bread that looks like it's from Mars. It'll pop up, at the bottom, at the sides, at the top, it'll bust open everywhere. So this not only makes it more aesthetically pleasing, but it also helps the bread to bake evenly because now it's got points of expansion.
Last night when I baked my bread, I was tired. And the one thing I forgot to do was the score. And I thought, what difference is it going to make? And when I took it out of the oven this morning, it had this big poof thing at the top that had come out of the pan.
Wow.
It will tend to expand wherever it wants to. And sometimes it's really pretty and other times it's really scary. It's like, what is happening here? It looks like an alien. Hang on one second. Betsy just sent me a message. So let me check because I know she's going to be here. So I just want to.
So Vicky, that's my husband, Sam, who's in listening kind of.
Yeah.
He's in listening mode. It's good. I like it. We're very family friendly. Let's see if I can find her message. Hang on one sec, lovies. All right, we're gonna cover this bad boy and we're gonna put him in the oven while we're looking for her message. Okay, so you have a couple of options when you cover it. You can use a bowl to invert it on the top, or you can use foil. Oh, here she comes. So this time we're going to use a bowl and just cover it up. You can also drop it into a pan and cover it. The only problem with that is that my pan is already hot because prior to coming on, I made some loaves of marble rye in the pan. So
you can even cover it with a towel, right? Like that bread towel thingy?
So, no, because you're putting it in the oven.
Oh, like this?
Yes, this is going right into the oven right now.
Oh.
So it goes from the fridge. We score it. We put it in the oven for 20 minutes covered and 20 minutes uncovered.
Okay, so if I have a covered baker.
Yep, you can pop it right in the covered baker, covered up, right in. All right, let me step that in here. All right, so that's going to go in there for 20 minutes. We're going to tell Siri to remind us in 20 minutes. So hang on just a second. Hey, Siri, set a timer for 20 minutes.
For 20 minutes.
That is the easiest way to do it. Now, all right, so that is in the oven, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now we're gonna take the dough that I made last night and we're gonna form a loaf. Because I want you to see every part. And even though we're doing it in reverse, there is a method to this. This way you'll see every part of the process. I've got my Benetton here, but if you don't have one, you don't need to have one. You could use a bowl or you could use some other form just to keep it contained. Because it loves to spread out and you'll end up with a super flat loaf otherwise. All right, so we need some wrap. Shout out any questions you might have. This is interactive and it's to help everybody. So if you're baking along, we are making our
Loaf, okay.
stuff here.
Use Benetton
Hello, Betsy.
or bowl.
Okay, so I'm gonna pour out this dough onto the counter.
And put plastic. Why did you put plastic wrap in there?
Because I don't want the mold that will happen in the basket.
No.
You don't want to eat mold, it's just not really appetizing.
Oh,
All right, so we're gonna go ahead and stretch this dough, fold it to the center. Fold it to the center, and then we're gonna roll it up like an egg roll. So we just pull it towards us, give it some tension, pull it towards us, give it some tension until you meet at the seam. And then you tuck in your sides. Okay, so now this loaf is the same size as this basket. The seam is going to go up, so we're gonna reverse it and put it into the basket.
my hand doesn't want to write as fast as you talk, but that's okay.
Well, you can get a transcript. I'll send you the transcript of everything I'm doing.
Okay.
You don't have to really write down every step. Plus, it's all written out in the,
Oh, you don't know me.
I do so. I've known you since kindergarten. Ha! All right. So we're gonna go ahead and give that a little bit of flour on top. And we're gonna cover him up and he's gonna go in the refrigerator. Cook him up. Now, technically, I can leave it in the refrigerator a couple of hours and bake it later, but I really like that the development of flavor. So to get that development of flavor, he's gonna park himself in the fridge. All right. Now we are going to make dough. Do you see how we're working in reverse?
Yeah, I have a quick question, Christine. So I'm planning on doing like a challah this morning.
Okay. Now,
So there is no refrigeration process for it, right?
right. Yes, there's no refrigeration for that. And the reason for that is you can refrigerate it. But because it has sugar and it can get very hard when you put it in the refrigerator. So it's a little tricky. So I always say start out doing it as a 1-day bread. And then once you get the hang of it, then you can go ahead and elongate that mix. But it's much easier to do it as a 1-day bread than it is to do it overnight. That makes sense?
Cool. It does. Thank you.
All right. So I have a very happy starter. And the reason I have a very happy starter is because I use some smart water. And the smart water has a lot of minerals in it, so it makes it very happy. You like happy starter. All right, I've got my scale.
What is Smart's water? Is that like a specific brand name?
Yeah, it's a brand. I'll show you the
Okay, cool. Oh, my starter's pretty happy at the moment. Now that I changed flours, it's like super bubbly.
There you go. All right, this is smart water. It just,
Got it.
you can find it in a store or, like any,
Yeah.
it's enhanced, mineral enhanced water, Okay, and I only use that if it's getting a little sluggish because I have a tank, the water tank, but anywho, I've got my scale, I've got my bowl, I zeroed it out. I'm gonna add 100 grams of starter, which is my standard, unless I know that I need it to slow down. If I need it to be like, a day and a half of rise, and I would only use 50 grams of starter because the amount of starter that you use tells you how long it's gonna rise.
So Christine, I have a question. How
You
is
bet.
your starter so thin? Is it because mine's gluten-free that it's different?
Yes, yours is
Okay.
so it's gonna be a little bit thicker, but I also have a very thick starter.
Okay.
That one is almost dry. It looks like dough. Because in the olden days, you can see it's kind of doughy.
Mm-hmm.
In the olden days, before they had commercial yeast, bakers would take yesterday's dough and they would save a portion of it to make the dough for that next day because they didn't have any yeast and they didn't have big vats and containers to keep their sourdough starter in either. So they would take pieces of dough and then incorporate that in the new batch and that would help that rise. So it's a similar kind of concept. So for some recipes in the advanced sourdough world, you might use a dry starter, like a thicker starter. But for our purposes, a 50-50 blend of water and flour by weight will get us where we want to go. There's no reason to make a thick starter at this point.
Well, I do use 50% water and 50% flour,
Right,
but
and
it still gets really thick.
Yes, because it's gluten-free and it tends
Okay.
up all the
So
way.
should I maybe add more water to it to make it thinner, or does?
Yeah, you could, but if it's working for you, don't adjust it.
Okay.
Get used to it.
Okay.
When you get more used to doing a lot of sourdoughs, I tend to use a little bit thicker starter. And when you mix it initially, it will be thicker. It's almost like a very thick pancake batter. But over time, because this one rose up and then it sunk back down. When it sinks back down, it tends to thin out more. So Vicky, when you get to use non-gluten free, you'll see the difference.
Okay. Thanks.
You betcha. All right, so we're gonna zero it out. We're gonna add 300 grams of water. Almost there, and we got 303, close enough. I call it good. All right, and we need 500 grams of flour. And I use my pot because it's almost 500 grams exactly. And I don't want to have to walk back and forth. And I just slowly put it in. Almost there. All right, there we go, 500. And then from there, we have choices. I tend to like mine a little saltier, but the more salt you put in, the slower the process is going to go because it retards the yeast development. So we'll start with maybe 12. 12 to 15 is about a normal amount for one loaf. Some have a little higher. If your starter is a little bit old and you need it to hang out a little bit longer and grow slower, you can add more salt. That's why one of them has 20 grams of salt. Okay, now we get our handy dandy clean fingies and we just mix.
So while you're mixing, I'll let you know something I learned about my salt. So I use pink Himalayan salt.
Yes.
And as it grows in stretches, sometimes it makes little streaks of pink. But it took me a good one time to learn, what is that pink streak? I'm like, oh, it's the salt, duh.
Yes, it does. It's freaky the first time you see it there. You're like, what's going on? Just like when you make gluten-free bread and you add psyllium husk, it turns your bread sort of a pinkish color. And the first time you see it, you're like, okay, what's happening?
What? Exactly.
But it's
what I do.
the reaction of the sour to the, to the other things. So it's completely normal. Okay, so now we have this nice shaggy dough, right? Just like looks like a blob, which is what we want. We're gonna cover it up. We're gonna leave it for a little bit and then we'll come back to it. All right, hang out there for a minute. All right, I'm gonna cover this dude. Let me get a cover here. I have a million of these bowls and a million covers, but whenever I have it, whenever I need it, it's on the other side of the room. It's like, it's crazy. Okay, so now we want to feed our starter, right? Because we've used a bunch of it, but I still have some in there. But I never feed my starter when it has a lot in there. I take most of it out and use it for something else. So that's what we're going to do. So I will use it in another recipe later on. I'm just going to pour out almost all of it. Whenever I feed my starter, I only want to feed just the little scraps. So you can see there's very, very little in there. A little bit at the bottom and a little bit on the sides. That's what I want. There's all different feeding schedules, and you'll see some crazy people talking about the percentage of each. You could make yourself crazy with this stuff. You could become a scientist, and people take the temperature of their starter, they take the temperature of their dough. I feel like they take all the joy out of baking. Like you should be able to feel it. Our grandparents didn't have all the fancy schmancy, so it should be something that anybody can do. All right, so now I've got that little scrap on the bottom of the container. I'm going to add 60 grams of water and equal parts of flour. Everybody in.
Is there a reason you put the water first?
Habit.
Okay.
It's easier to remove the water when it's mostly liquid. If you go over,
Okay, got it.
you know, when I was in school, everything was methodical. You do it always put the water, you know, you've got your starter, your water, your flour. This way, if the flour is not wet, if you need to take it out. And then you always want to add a little bit of flour to your hands and just rub them together to get all the excess off your hands rather than wash it off, because you don't want to clog up your sink with a lot of sourdough. So give me just a second to do that and then we'll mix that. I'm taking care of your questions while I do that.
How often do you maybe switch to another starter cup just so you can get some of the dried stuff off?
So I usually clean it out every other day.
Okay.
I obviously don't like it to be that messy, but you can really scrape it down so that
Yeah.
it's not hanging out on the sides. You know, I'll just use a scraper and I really scrape.
Yeah.
it.
Mine is fairly clean, but then of course, like as it goes up and sometimes
Yeah.
comes down, it
So
will
it'll
kind
get
of
funky.
hangs out,
Yeah, it gets a little on the funky side. I
dry.
get it.
Yeah. Dries
So
out a bit.
then when you take it out of that jar, leave the remnants in the jar, let it dry out completely. You can tap it out once it's completely dry, and that's your dehydrated starter.
Okay.
And that's why you
Wait.
have extra if something ever happens to it. or you
Say
have
that again?
Yeah, say that again.
I'll show you. Hang on one sec. Let me get another container. I'll show you what I mean. I have a lot of jars. So I need them. Here we go. Okay. So I'm going to take what we just mixed and I'm going to take it out of this container. Okay, to a clean jar. So I'm just going to flip it into here, the whole mixture. See how thick it is?
Mm-hmm.
Like really thick pancake batter. But over time, it will thin out.
Right. Well, the bubbles seem to help it thin out once it
Yeah,
starts like
That's exactly what happens.
gurgling.
Yep, it'll start to become nice and bubbly, and then it will thin out, and then the bubbles will drop, and you'll be left with what we just had. Okay, so some people like to bake at peak bubbly, and some people like to bake after the bubbles subside. And the reason for that is they feel like it has a stronger flavor.
Mhm.
And so giving it a new infusion of flour and water in your dough means it will grow. So either way, you're good. Okay, so now this is what we just mixed. I put it into a clean jar. Now this is what's left in the jar. Rather than wash it out, I'm gonna let it dry out. It takes about a day. You're just gonna let it dry in there. Once it's completely dry, it'll peel away from the glass. You can put it in an oven with the light on or whatever. It'll dehydrate. Once it dehydrates, you can tap it out, grind it up in a blender, and then you have dehydrated sourdough starter.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah,
Interesting.
to pass on. Although, to be honest, it's nicer to pass on fresh starter than it is treat.
Right.
Because
Oh, I forgot to add that because I just did my post with the affiliate link today. And I forgot to say that if you like, if they're local, that I can like give them some to start with.
I've been starting to send out fresh starter.
Mm-hmm.
So with anybody that signs up, I've been sending them fresh starter. The first time I did it, I thought the post office was gonna have a heart attack.
Right? Because they don't like liquids.
Yeah. So what I did is I put it in a plastic baggie and I rolled it up. It looks like drugs. It's great.
Perfect.
I'm sure they're gonna love me for that. Like,
Oh,
what's in here? Give them a little run for their money. It's all good. All right. We're gonna go back to the dough that we just mixed. It's had a few seconds to relax. See how nice and relaxed it is? I can pick it up. It's very pliable. So you can stretch and fold, but now that you already know how to do it, you can pick it up and just fold it in on itself. It's the same thing in the jar and do like this. Alternatively, you can take it on the table. You're gonna slap it, fold it forward, slap it, fold it forward. And what that's gonna do is to develop the gluten a lot faster.
Okay. I'll give that a try.
You're gonna
I like
start
that.
to see that it's nice and smooth much quicker.
Yeah, I bet.
You still need to do it 3 or 4 times. But now it's that nice ball. We're just gonna put that right back in there. Cover it up and let it rest. And then
Let it
while
rest about 15 minutes.
about 15 minutes, yeah. And it could go as long as like half an hour or so. I mean, everybody gets kind of stuck on the timing. It's pretty flexible. You know what I mean? Like you don't have to be like, oh my gosh. It's
But
past
you don't want it to sit too long.
Well, if it does, you're folding it up anyway. It's just for development of gluten. It's
Okay.
just
Right.
smooth it out. So if you went an hour, it's not the end of the world. There's been times where I've fallen asleep and not folded and stretched it at all, and it came out fantastic. So, you know, these
So
are
you
all.
do that a few times then?
Mhm. I do it 3 times
That's it.
until it's completely smooth.
Yeah.
So 15
And I
minutes.
also did the poke test too, because don't you have a
Yeah.
video on the poke test?
Mm-hmm.
That was
poke
really
test.
helpful.
We do the poke test, you can do the window pane test, you can look at how much it's doubled. You want about 75% of doubled, it doesn't have to be completely doubled. You want some nice bubbles in there. So there's a lot of things we look at. Is the dough shiny on top? Is it pulling away from the edge real well? You know, and if in doubt, let it go a little longer. It's better to be
Okay.
slightly overproofed than underproofed.
Okay.
Underproofed, you get gummy bread. Overproofed, you just get more holes.
Okay.
All right.
Question about scoring. So today I'm doing one with inclusions,
Yes.
and it's in the fridge. It's ready to go. It was in there overnight. All I have to do is score it and warm up the oven.
Yeah.
So I was thinking, with the inclusions, do I need to be more careful with the score? Because I don't have
Yeah, because it's
I don't
gonna
know how to
come.
pronounce it. The lame. I don't have one of those yet. I'm just kind of using a knife.
What inclusions did you put in there?
I put in small, tiny, like probably like 5 mm cubes of cheese.
Okay. All
They're
right.
tiny.
Well, cheese is good because if you're putting things like nuts in there and you score it, they'll pop
Mhm.
out. Whereas cheese sort of melts in, so that's fine.
Right. Okay.
I would do a shallow score rather than a deep score.
Okay.
But a simple thing is you don't want them to push out of the dough. You want to keep it in the dough.
Right.
That makes sense?
Exactly. Yes. Like when I scored my one last time, I thought I went deeper, but I guess I didn't because it popped its own crease down at the bottom.
It was just very active. It was just happy
It was
to be there.
determined, yes.
Let me out. Let me out.
Exactly.
But honestly, God, when you slice it up, who gives a crap, right? Because no one's gonna
I
know.
should show you what I bake in because it's totally different. It's like a silicone wrap.
Yeah, those are cool.
Oh, you've seen them. Okay.
Oh yeah, that like I'm a big bread nerd. Like I
I'm sure.
love it. All right, so while we're waiting for our dough to do its thing over there, I thought I would give you a little preview of the marble rye. That's a yeast bread that's coming.
Yes. Nice.
in. Okay, so here's what the dough looks like. It's very stretchy. So I made the dough last night. I did a couple straction folds and then I pop it in the refrigerator overnight. And here's the beauty of it. You can lock off pieces of it, like I'm doing now, and just make that much bread. Or you could bake off it makes about 4 to 5 loaves, depending on how big your loaves are. So I have a friend who has stage 4 cancer, and he's leaving tomorrow to go to his cancer center. And his wife sent me a message today and said, do you think that you could bring over some bread before he goes? So of course I'm going to do that. So that's what we're making right now. So how this is made, I'll leave up to the class itself because it's it takes a process. But basically it's 2 doughs put together that we just twist together to make it marble. But it works very similar to sourdough, even though it's made with yeast. It has a long rise in the refrigerator, which is called retarding the dough, which is not very PC right now. But that is what it's called because it slows everything down. So the majority of the bulk fermentation happens in the refrigerator on this dough. We start with it just fermenting at room temperature for 1 hour, and then we pop it in the refrigerator, but not in its final shape. We do it as a bulk fermentation in the refrigerator. That makes sense to everybody?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yep.
We're going to form it just like we would do any other dough. We're going to bring it into the center. You can kind of see the variations in here. We're going to bring it into the center, into the center, into the center, into the center, flip it over. And then you're going to use the heel of your hand and you're just going to push that dough in on itself, creating that round loaf. So you just keep it moving. And the tension from the surface of the counter is going to help me to keep it round. And you'll know you're good if you flip it over and it's not a lot of separation. If it separates out, you got to let it sit there for a few minutes and relax and then do it one more time. Okay? Before you put it in the basket. The difference is where sourdough rises in the refrigerator in the basket, This one rises in bulk in the refrigerator, comes back out and rises in the basket. And that is our timer to uncover the bread. Maybe.
So is this marble rye going to be one of the bonuses in the classroom that
So
we can
it'll be
watch
a-
at some point?
Oh, it'll be a separate class. They're $9.99 doing a series of maybe 10 to 12 different breads. So each one of those breads will have its own class, but it's $9.99. So this is a 2-day bread.
Okay,
But there's some that are 1-day breads and some that are, variations.
gotcha.
But these will all be yeast bread. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and give that a bit of the rye flour. We're gonna flip them upside down, boom. And we're gonna cover it up and let that rise at room temperature for 1 hour before I bake it. Okay, so that's the difference. You've got 2 different ways of handling your dough. All right, we're gonna flip you over here and hopefully you can see. I'm gonna open the oven and uncover the bread. This. Maybe. Ah, it's looking beautiful. Let me take them out and show you better. I know it's kind of hard to see.
Looks great.
Maybe. Come on. You got to talk to your pans and such, So that's where he's looking right now. All right, 20 more minutes in here. And since
You
you
said
probably-
20 minutes?
It's been 20 minutes now.
Okay.
Yep, and you gotta go back in for 20 minutes. So, hey Siri, set a timer for 20 minutes. That's my favorite feature. All right, so let me show you what the final view of the bread is, the pumpernickel bread. So I did one. I'm coming here. I did one like a round loaf. So I just did some cuts on this side and an ear. That center one is called an ear because it usually opens up into an ear. And then I got one that is a longer loaf. So this one was in the basket. But you'll see that it has a lot more spread. It's not quite as, it didn't have a container, so it spreads out more. It's a little more on the flat side, whereas the bowl is a little more on the round side. So let's cut this guy open real quick. You can get some parchment paper. Just so you can see what the interior looks like. Because I don't know about y'all, but I'm a very visual learner.
Absolutely, me too.
I need to see everything.
Definitely.
And kinesthetic too. Got to touch it.
Yes, I get that. That's the hard part about teaching online, but you can see the
Oh, pretty.
Yeah.
variations and the different parts.
Great.
Yeah.
One will come in a little different because each time you do it, you've got a little less dough to work with, so you're whirling it a bit differently. Let's look at this one. It's still a little warm, but we'll make it work.
Wow.
Nice.
Pretty. Pretty.
With steam coming off of it. But
Can see the
I
steam.
honestly, the smell is amazing.
I'm
And
sure.
let me show you. So it's very soft. It's got a nice crust on it, but it's not like super crusty. So if you like a crustier, you can obviously pop it back in the oven and make it crustier. That reminds me to tell you too, if you decide you want to freeze your sourdough, like the whole loaf, right? You can run it all under water, get the whole loaf wet, pop it back into a 450-degree oven and let it bake until it's no longer frozen inside. And it will taste just like you just baked it.
Oh, okay.
Alternatively, you could slice it first. I'll show you. And keep it in a baggie. And then you can do the same thing. Wet the slices down, pop them in the toaster, and it's like you just baked it. Much better than going from frozen to toaster. Do we have any questions?
No, actually, it was just one little one. So when these other like artisan classes are going to become available, are you going to notify us? So, because I know I'm
Of
definitely
course.
interested in more, of course.
Of course I will. Of course. Honestly, I had intended to try and get it done. But sometimes me and technology, as you know, Betsy, it doesn't always love me.
Right.
And so-
Me too. I understand.
It takes me a long time to edit because I have to film it in little tiny parts and then put it all together. And sometimes they get out of order and then I have to start again. So,
Ah,
you know,
understood.
it's like,
No
okay,
worries.
is it going to work today? Maybe tomorrow.
I'm still only on, as of today, I'll be on the challah bread one, the sweet bread one.
Yep.
And I still have more to do in there to play with it.
Yep. And you know, anytime that you get stuck, anytime you have questions, I am absolutely fully available.
Oh, you've been wonderful about that.
It is my favorite.
That's why I called you the sourdough queen in my post.
Thank you. Well, I'll tell you, if you're ever on my way, you can come bake with me. We'll do a full baking. Kristen came, I made her and her daughter bake with me.
Yep,
That is
it was
awesome.
lots of fun.
It was so
I
fun.
bet.
I love it. I love it.
Awesome.
And there's so much we can do. I mean, when on the bakery, we did lots of cinnamon rolls and we did bagels and bialys and, so there's endless opportunities for different things, pies and tarts and blah, blah, blah.
Oh, yeah.
So
Very
I
nice.
have, go ahead.
Question?
I do have a question. You said you use the remainder of the starter for other things.
Yes.
What
So,
what other things do you use it for?
crackers, pancakes, all kinds of things. In fact, let's do a quick, we'll do that really quick while we wait, because we still have what to do in other fold. So, and I know it's Saturday, so if you have other things to do, feel free to hop off, or Sunday, I don't even know what day we're on. Saturday, Sunday, one of those days. Let me get a bowl. All right. So the first thing we're gonna do is melt 2 tablespoons of butter. Okay, so I'm gonna put these 2 tablespoons of butter here. We're just gonna pop that in the microwave and get that melted. I'm gonna take that sourdough starter, I'm gonna mix it in. Maybe. Yeah. Get another piece of starter. Actually, I like the nonstick foil for this, because then it doesn't stick at all.
I put it on my grocery list.
Sorry. Okay. It only takes a few seconds in the microwave, and it's a little bubbly, but that's part of life. All right. So now I'm gonna take that 2 tablespoons of melted butter. We're gonna add all of this starter in there. About 100 grams. And you can do this with gluten-free and you can do this with regular. All right, we're just gonna swirl that in there until it's completely absorbed.
That's what I'm making right now as you're doing all this.
There we go.
Thing is the crackers. So I'm about to put 2 pans of crackers in the oven.
There we go. I'm gonna pour that in. Just so it gets nice and stretchy. And if your starter is a little thicker, you can add a little bit of water to thin it out before you add your butter. We're just gonna spread it out. You can do it thick or you can do it thin. It's kind of up to you. It almost tastes like pita chips. Spread it out fairly evenly. And then I like to give it a tap. Sorry if that's loud. And then I'm gonna take some sesame seeds. If I can find them. Where to put the sesame seeds? Maybe I'm not gonna put them. This is what happens. I clean and then I can't find anything. It's for real. Let me find them. Hang on one sec. All right, well, we're gonna skip the seeds and we're gonna go with Italian seasoning. Yeah. It's just crazy. I just had that. Okay, well, whatever. We're just gonna
Sounds
spray.
good.
These are really good. The Italian seasoning ones are great. Okay, and then we're gonna use a little bit of Celtic sea salt. Get a little flavor, just a flaky salt. I have like 20 different kinds of salt. I'm ridiculous. And we're gonna put this in the oven with the bread. Okay. Which our bread is looking marvelous. So when the bread is done, our crackers should be done, and all I'm gonna do is cut the crackers up. I used to score them halfway through, and now I don't even bother. I just break them up afterwards. Because I got lazy. In a second. We're gonna give our bread one more fold. Just wipe my hand off here. All right. I always do my folds when possible with wet hands, because then the dough does not stick to my fingers. All right, so here we are. Our dough is nice and relaxed. You can see it, it's kind of starting to rise a little bit. We're gonna come in and we're gonna stretch it up and stretch it to the other side. Stretch it up and to the other side. And I just go all the way around. At this point, I can pick it up. So I'm just gonna fold it in on itself. And those wet hands really help that it doesn't stick. And we're just gonna pop it back in. At this point, although it's not traditional, I do like it, so I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna cover it with a tiny bit of olive oil. And what that's gonna do is really gonna help the color of the crust. It also softens the crumb just a bit. So I really like the flavor. Not very traditional, I will say that. And then I just press it back down, cover it back up. We'll do it one more time. And then just let it grow on its own. All right. Wipe that up. Like I said, I know y'all have a lot going on today, so I don't want to keep you too long. Anybody have any questions at this point?
Do you usually, when you do the oil, is that the step where you do the oil?
Yes, you always want to do it after you've done a few stretch and folds.
Okay.
I don't like to put it in the beginning because I feel like it can stop the growth of the yeast, the wild yeast in the starter. So I do it after I've done the folds. Good question.
So like after the second time, maybe.
Mhm.
Okay.
You can even do it after the third time. You want to do it, before it starts bulk fermentation is all. Yes, let me show you what the loaf is looking like now, because it's grown quite a bit since we took the cap off. And then what I'll do is, I will post the recording of this, and then I'll show you all the pictures of everything that we did. So I'll show you the pictures of the finished bread. We're not gonna get quite finished with this right there, but this is what it's looking like right now. See how blonde it is?
Mhm.
It's gonna be nice and dark when we're done. One thing about me, I really, really like to bake my bread with a really dark crust. I don't like super blonde crust because I feel like it lacks flavor. It's very pretty and a lot of people really love it just from personal preference. Because something I can help you with. Shut up. So you're talking to me. I trained under a German chef and everything they bake is like most Americans would think it was burnt. And so when I started in the bakery, people were like, I don't want the dark one. I'm like, yes, you do. It's the best one. It's the one with the most flavor. And it took me forever to convince people to try it. Once they did, they were happy with it, but they were very resistant.
Yeah, my first successful loaf didn't have as dark of a crust as I'd like, and I was thinking to myself, is it because my oven is off? The oven's old; it's been in the house for like 24 years, so I just don't know.
Yeah, you know what I had to do? I'll show you real
Mm.
quick. I'm going to turn this over here again. So I had to turn off the oven, hit bake 450 again, and hit start again. And in a second, it'll show you what the temperature is. I bet you anything, yours is like mine, and it drops temperature. So
Probably.
if you fix it, the last 15 minutes is the most important for color. So,
Okay.
So see, right now it's registering at 408. It should be. At
Oh, okay.
408. So
Right.
let's just form up this long loaf,
Okay.
and then we'll call it good. And then I'll show you guys I'll show you pictures of what we did. All right, so I'm just folding
Thank
it
you.
on itself. And now I've met that seam. I'm tucking in the sides. And I'm just gonna put this one on a sheet pan. So I'm not even gonna put it in a Benetton or anything. Just right onto the sheet pan. I'm gonna sprinkle it with some of this rye flour. Let it sit out for an hour, and then I'll bake it. Same procedure as before, 20 minutes covered, 20 minutes uncovered. And this is the loaf that we warmed up earlier with the marble rye. So it's starting to get a little bit puffier, and it should probably be pretty close to about 3/4 of the way up the side of the basket before I bake it. But boy, my kitchen is very warm right now, so it won't have
I
any
can
trouble.
imagine. Probably
But
smells really good too.
Oh, it smells amazing, but I'm
Yeah.
sweating. So if anybody does, any other questions? See, now it's at temperature.
Okay.
Crazy oven.
I know.
I would
I have a
frequently,
gas oven, so I don't know if that's different.
no, it actually isn't. I would frequently check your temperature Just
Okay.
punch it back in again. And
Okay.
you'll see that, especially if you're opening the door at all, it drops really fast, especially gas. It'll drop
Yeah.
really fast, but you have to do that because you want to. One
Gotta
other
put
thing,
some-
one other thing I will tell you, halfway through baking, once you've uncovered it, it is also nice to throw in some ice. That creates steam, and that's
Oh, okay. I'll do
so,
that today. Give it
yeah.
a try.
Yeah, it's really helpful to develop a nice crust on it.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah, of course, of course. And Vicky is our resident gluten-free baker.
Okay.
She's done all the gluten-free ones, so she's pretty amazing. And
Very cool.
Kristen got a lot of practice when she came to visit my house.
I did.
So yeah. So post your pictures. You know I love it. The baking nerd in me gets so excited. So feel free to tag me or questions or anything afterwards, because I know sometimes when you're in the middle of doing stuff, you forget the questions, and then later on you're like, oh shoot, I forgot to ask that question. So just feel free to ask anything, and I will put the replay up in Skool.
Awesome.
Perfect. Awesome.
Yeah.
Are you gonna put it as like in the classroom, or are you gonna put it in the discussion area?
I'll put it in the discussion area, but I will tag y'all.
Okay. Sounds good.
Thank
Okay.
you, Christine.
Mwah. Have
Thank
a good rest
you.
of the day.
Thank you.
for joining. Bye.
See
Bye.
ya.
Oh yeah. And thank you for the t-shirt for the week thing. It's
Oh,
funny
you're
because it's
welcome.
black. I'm gonna end up with like flour all over it.
I have black on. I wear black every day. You'll get used to it. No flour.
Exactly. Exactly. Take care of yourself. Have a great rest of your Sunday.
Bye.
And thank you for
love
doing that.
too. Bye.
Bye. Thank
Bye.
you.